going on behind the scenes that I'm excited about and excited to talk about. So, yeah, pretty good over here.
Drinking anything today? Some coffee?
Unfortunately, because we had a mishap with the car keys and trying to find them before my wife had to go to an appointment, I did not get a chance to make a pot of coffee. So we'll see. In fairness, I think I've already had 4 cups today, so it's probably for the best.
Nice. You're a coffee guy, right?
Yeah. I'm a coffee guy, and since I started intermittent fasting, I've become more of a coffee guy. So
you have to keep going somehow.
I started this thing. I started this thing where, like, when I go to a coffee shop, I get like a shot of espresso and my coffee,
Mhm.
and they're my normal spot is starting to understand that what I want is like a shot of espresso and also a coffee, but they always put the shot in the coffee, and I'm like no, I want not a like dirty, caffeine addict. I'm sophisticated.
Just keep them separate.
I want to sip my Jesus Christ, King Shred.
Oh, King Shred! Oh my God!
God.
Holy cow!
I don't think you can say that, but whatever.
No, yeah,
I don't
say
care.
that.
I mean,
anything goes in the economic forum.
I guess so. Jeez.
Yeah, this is the trust we're building with the audience, Chris. It's our issue.
I'm getting mixed signals from you, Shred. I'm getting mixed signals.
Gareth, my friend, how are you doing?
Pleasure of did I cut out there for a sec? Sorry about that. I had the pleasure of witnessing Chris without his coffee a week or 2 ago.
Oh my God, dude! My coffee pot, like the actual pot part, shattered, and well, it didn't shatter, but it cracked, and the company no longer manufactures the coffee maker that I have. So it was a rough day. Rough. It took me a while to recover, like a couple of days to recover.
Emotionally?
I think physically. I think that I realized that there was a physical dependency there, but
yeah,
there is.
No lights on in his room. No shirt on, just.
Oh, shut up! I had a shirt. I definitely probably didn't have lights on, but I was clothed.
Yeah, I
know. But with this introduction, we're segueing to the Stratas Economic Forum. I think this is the 9th Economic Forum or 10th.
Yeah,
I don't know. 9th.
Yep.
Time flies.
I know. We are quickly approaching number 12.
Yeah. What are we going to do for the year? Now we need to think about that. The 1-year anniversary of the Econ Forum.
I've got a good idea, but I'll save it for later.
Yeah. But yeah, today we're going to be here, of course, with Chris and Gareth, our Econ team. If you don't know what the Econ Forum is, it's monthly, and we have the Econ team here just commenting on everything related to the Stratas economy. They usually give us a presentation with the latest that has been happening and updates, and then we leave some time also for Q&A at the end. So today, the guys are going to be talking about the community dashboard, the new FICs and how they're doing, a secret topic, and we'll do some Q&A at the end. But with that introduction, I'll hand the mic over to Chris and Gareth, so you guys can walk us through the 9th Economic Forum.
Sweet. I will. I'll just. Gareth, I think I'll share my screen. I know you've got the first topic, but it makes sense to just do it that way. Yeah. Welcome everybody. 9th monthly Star Atlas Economic Forum. I'm assuming you all know by now, but this is an opportunity for the economics team to kind of equally distribute information across the entire player base. This is a place to disseminate information that would otherwise not be accessible to everybody. So this is a great opportunity to get everybody in the same room and discuss updates, events, things that have happened in the last month. So without further ado, let's get into a few topics for today. Those are going to be a community dashboard update, just a couple of stats on the faction infrastructure contracts, the new ones, and then we've got an exciting secret topic at the end that I'm extremely stoked about, and we got sign off from Michael Wagner to chat about that one. And then, of course, as usual, we'll do a Q&A at the end, have opportunity for people to ask questions to us. So let's jump in.
Thank you, Chris. So yeah, the first update will be for the community dashboard, and there are two distinct things coming out that are pretty much live right now. Aside from some patch notes like stability and the new sidebar labels, we are adding Galactic Marketplace secondary price and volume charts, as well as just some updated Atlas emissions to include faction infrastructure contracts. Just to touch on the Atlas emissions first, the charts seem to have a small issue in incognito mode. So if you are to view the Atlas emissions charts, just make sure to use a non-incognito browser, just probably until end of day when that privacy issue is resolved. But the main slice of cake here is the Galactic Marketplace update. Now, what this is, it's a basically a comprehensive overview of price and volume over time per asset, per currency, and yeah, even per asset type. So you can go in there, you can either click an asset name on the left table to view the historical, or you can search it. You'll see an all-time average price in the bottom left based on the currency you select, which can be USDC or Atlas. And then you can also look at asset class aggregations. So if you want to see how extra small they're doing, or certain resource group, or anything like that, you can see that aggregate price chart displayed, as well as volume per currency. So something that I know you guys have been asking for a very long time. It was originally planned to be incorporated into the Galactic Marketplace UI, but with everything going on, for now, I think it'd be, or you guys would prefer at least to have this sooner rather than later. So excited for you guys to jump in there. If you see any weird stuff in there, there's a ton of touch points in this dashboard. So if you see for some reason an asset in a specific currency at a specific time is looking a little weird, feel free to reach out. I did a bunch of spot checking QA myself, and this data is pretty scrutinized on our back end, but there's always room for small blips and anomalies here and there. So, but overall, very solid, very accurate view. Hopefully you guys enjoyed that. And then finally, the roadmap. We have a very clean, less computationally intensive view of fleets coming in soon. So we'll be able to give that to you guys as well, alongside a lookup. We heard your feedback from last week, specifically, local market price change relative to global. That'll be coming pretty soon, probably much much in advance of the next forum. Local markets, historical price and volume. That made more sense to wait a few weeks while those price charts filled out. And Galactic Marketplace being a lower hanging fruit, that came first, but those local market charts will be coming soon. And then someone requested a game activity wallet lookup, which I think is a great idea. There's some tools similar to that out there already, but having it embedded in the Star Atlas dashboards will, expand reach to newer players or people who aren't familiar with our community tools, or Flipside specifically. So excited to have that. And again, as usual, if you guys have any more suggestions, feel free to drop them in the chat. I look at all of them, and no stone will be left unturned in that regard. So you guys will be able to view the Galactic Marketplace update now. And again, you're using incognito, just bear in mind that the Atlas emissions chart just have a small privacy issue there. So if you want to view that, use it outside of incognito. And with that,
Jared,
I will pass it.
I have a question. Can I put you on the spot really quick?
Yeah, go for
Do you
it.
allow me to throw the Econ Ninja here under the bus? No, I'm joking. It's an easy one, but I'm curious, out of the dashboard, what is your favorite stat that you see there? Like, what's your favorite data that you can see in the dashboard?
Out of all of the dashboards, or the ones that are just the updates for this week?
Out of all of the dashboards, like the Econ Ninja highlight.
Oh man, I mean, right now it's probably got a. My favorite visual is the warp map. That's just a classic. I love seeing, especially restricting on the days where people are moving their operations to, where the most activity is. And I am a sucker for maps, so probably number 2 would be the local market overview. The power in there to restrict on the date, especially, and see average prices, is one of those things that if you're a producer, it's almost invaluable. I know historical price charts will provide some more, foresight in terms of predicting, where you think prices will go in the future relative to trends and things like that. But in the meantime, at least, saving time clicking around in the Sage UI, or, seeing even over a period of weeks or months in the future, what the average price is at specific star bases. That's just huge for profit maximization and getting the most out of your operations. So those two are probably my top in terms of insight / visual. But I think utility-wise, this new Galactic Marketplace view is one thing that even people not playing Sage will be interested in. So 3 categories, 3 separate answers. I hope that they gave you what you were looking for, Santi.
I love it. Yeah. Thank you.
And I think we're good to move on to Chris, unless Chris, you had a comment there.
Oh, I was going to say I agree with the map sentiment. I remember, like, when we first released Sage, some of the first data we looked at for the quarterly report was warping data, and the main reason was it was one of the cleanest transactions that was coming through that required the least amount of excuse me, manipulation on our part to go find other pieces of data. So, like, some of the operations that come in on chain are really messy and we have to search around. So the warping data came through really clean. It had location that they were warping to, and ID of the wallet ID, all this stuff. So we were able to create that visualization pretty much right off the bat from the data as it started coming in. So not just a cool visualization, but also one that's close to our hearts, as it was one of the first visuals that I remember making when Sage first released back in 2023. So yeah, totally agree.
And I guess last comment from me then would be to say that the Star Atlas, as we framed it as a company, is this tool in the future that allows anybody to interact with any part of the Star Atlas economy through this encompassing 3D map. Hopefully you see these dashboards as this small product from the econ team to sort of get ahead of that narrative. But for me, loving these maps, it all looks forward to this bigger global overview that we hope to develop as a company in the future, which is something to get excited and look forward to. So enjoy this small snippet from a 2-man econ team in the meantime, and amazing things to come involving maps in the future. So all you, Chris.
It's and I do want to give credit to Daniel Devet. He works very closely with us. In fact, I would argue he's a part of the econ team. But so he's our data engineer. He is absolutely instrumental in creating the feeds, not just the blockchain feeds, but also web traffic feeds. So he's basically where we get all of our data from. So really, really awesome work for a 3-person team. We'll give Daniel a little bit of credit there.
Yes, you're right.
Sweet. So I did want to just go over a few small highlights for faction infrastructure contracts, since we did release a new set of recipes over the last month. And I've seen some pretty good feedback thus far in the community. It seems like a lot of people are happy with them, which I'm really stoked about. I realized I didn't put a I didn't list what the actual recipe is, but it's very similar to the original recipe with a few very important changes. So first of all, rather than the second input being, or sorry, I don't remember what input number it is, but basically we replaced, I believe it was frameworks with Crystal Lattice. So each faction's recipe is slightly different with respect to the third item, the third ingredient. So those remained the same, but we replaced the frameworks with Crystal Lattice. And somebody can correct me if I'm wrong. I've been doing a lot of recipes lately, so I'm getting things mixed up. But and then the other component was a reduction in the relative requirement of survey data units. And what that means is basically when we think about recipe creation, normally we give all of the inputs, all of the ingredients equal weighting. This time we underweighted SDUs. So SDUs made up a smaller portion of the value of the recipe. So that's about as detailed as I'll get with respect to recipe creation. But basically what it meant was the number of SDUs required was reduced given the value of the other inputs. So the market value, if you were to look at the market value of the ingredients, the market values should mostly be equal, but in this recipe, the market value coming from SDUs, at least at inception, was lower than the other ones. So that was in order to help kind of alleviate some of the stress on the SDU market. There is definitely, there's definitely some continuing pains with the SDU market that are, it's still something that comes up every once in a while. But yeah, hopefully that'll help to alleviate that. So with that long introduction out of the way, I just wanted to give you guys highlights on how our fix is doing. We are missing some data at the end of the period here. For reference, we released the new FIC recipe on January 26th or thereabouts. And so we can see kind of the infrastructure contract is in red and LP Atlas is in blue. So this is all Atlas emissions in Sage, split up by whether it came from an infrastructure contract or came from an LP. So you can tell that still the vast majority of emissions from Sage are coming from LP and not infrastructure contracts. So far, we've been floating around our old mean of 6 million Atlas per day. We're perhaps a little bit above that, which is not ideal, but we're still above what we call kind of our max threshold, which is this just north of 8 million. I think it's 8.5 million. That is technically where the ecosystem emission rate should be given the white paper, or as defined in the white paper. Now, times have changed, and we also have score emissions. So this is not some sort of target. This is more of this is what we had kind of said would be the maximum. So yeah, and you can see the missing data there. But if we break this out by the IC redemptions themselves, and this is an Atlas value, so this is just basically Atlas that's been generated from the infrastructure contracts themselves. And then I've broken it out by old contract and new contract. So this is the old recipes, and these are the new recipes. Both recipes are live right now. And again, we're kind of missing some data at the very end there, which is kind of a bummer. But you can see, for the most part, I believe the average is pretty much equal, at least for these days, between the old recipes and the new recipes. If not a tiny bit of more production of the new recipes compared to the old recipes. And then I broke it also out by faction to just kind of see what's the preference between the factions. You can see Ooster has really been just overall dominating the infrastructure contract production pipeline. And we've also seen, pretty much both Ooster and Mud are preferring the new contracts to the old contracts, but Oni is still far out producing old contracts compared to the new contracts. Okay, any chance, I see a comment that seems like a good time to answer a question. Any chance Zelex asks, any chance you are going to relook at the fix, especially for Ooster, as it's the most unbalanced one due to the crafting time? 157 electronics takes 2100 seconds of crafting time versus 78 and 64 energy substrates, which require less crafting time. That's an interesting point. The energy substrates and the strange emitters, however, are composed of other assets. So, there is additional crafting time to create an energy substrate. I'm kind of curious if Zalex, does that crafting time include for energy substrates and strange emitters? Is that including the time to create the inputs that go into energy substrate? I see. That's total crafting time, all underlying recipes. Okay. Yeah, that's certainly one component that we could look at, and it's definitely something that we can take a look at. I mean, to be honest with you, I'm not like seeing anything in the data that would suggest that Ooster is worse off, but by all means, we'll certainly take a look. There are a lot of different metrics that we can look at when it comes to a recipe. I see somebody commented on mining times. There's crafting time, there's mining time, there's transport time. There's some cargo is heavier than other cargo. There's a lot of different variables at play here. So, it's definitely something where we can monitor. I hadn't previously seen the crafting times as an issue, so I'll definitely take a note of that. But again, just seeing how much more is being produced by Ooster, I'd be surprised. Now, again, one player could massively shift, the mean or the total sum. So it's important to look at this at the median or even for the bottom, 80% of players versus the top 20%, which is what we're going to talk about in the next slide. I do see a couple of other questions potentially coming in. I'll answer those after we talk about this slide. So I've kind of got a visual here that's not super meaningful. It's just kind of to emphasize the point that of IC redemptions to date, 20% of players have received 84.3% of all IC emissions. Now, that's actually pretty close to the classic, Pareto rule. We've talked about this a bunch in the past, but this idea that typically in physics and in economics, there's this kind of there's this rule that says that 20% of the I don't know. I don't want to misspeak in terms of the physics definition, but basically the economics definition is that 20% of people will account for 80% of production. And you also will see it where 20% of people will account for 80% of wealth. And that's almost a natural law. And you see it a lot in nature as well. And I think it's important to note that, like, just because you might think, 20% of people should own 20% of the stuff. Well, that's not how nature works, right? Like, we use bell curves to define natural events, right? We don't use a uniform distribution. So just because you're at the bottom percentile doesn't mean that you have the same amount as the person at the top percentile. So totally honestly pretty reasonable numbers here. I was really happy to see that it's a 2084. It's not a perfect 2080, which I think is kind of my soft target in my head in terms of productive inequality or income inequality. And I don't mean inequality in kind of the negative sense. I just mean in terms of the unequal distribution that we're talking about. The Pareto distribution is an unequal distribution. So anyway, thought that was a really interesting thing. This is not as dramatic as some of our other measures. So we have other measures like if we were to look at the total wealth of a wallet across our ecosystem, it's more like 2095, which is, when we're talking about people who can come in and buy up millions of dollars worth of assets, that's to be expected, quite frankly. But when we're able to get this perfect measure of productivity through ICs, I think it's really cool to see the number kind of go back to what we would like to see. So this is pretty cool. It does pose the question, like, okay, could it be better? Could we have a situation where that distribution? I mean, there's how many? I'm trying to think. There's probably 192 people here, or just over 200 people here, and you can really only see this is not a log graph. This is just raw numbers. You can only really see the top 10. Everybody else is a tiny, tiny, tiny fraction. And I think it helps emphasize, what does the game look like if this is less dramatic, if it's more like 80-20, or if it's 20-80, or if it's 20-70. Do we have a more engaging infrastructure or ecosystem? Because you have to remember that these massive players rely on the small people to create the economy and keep the economy churning. You can't just have 10 super mega whales and nobody else. You need a nice distribution of players at all different points of the distribution. And I would argue maybe we're a little bit thin in that middle part of the distribution. So anyway, kind of on this topic of who has what and how did they get it, and is there a world in which maybe what happens to the Star Atlas ecosystem when we distribute the I don't know, stuff more equally, or it's based off of skill, is something I see in the comments. All right. Somebody says the gap was created by the LP system. So that gap was definitely not created by the LP system. That gap was present before we even released Sage, but interesting comment. Okay, so I want to talk to you guys, at least in a small, kind of introductory way, about Sage Free to Play. This is a small project that a very, very tiny part of the team is working on, basically on the weekends. We're building and testing a free-to-play version of the game. And what this is basically everybody starts off with the same materials and same fleet, and they start progressing through both an infrastructure contract crafting system, as well as a ship crafting system. So basically, we just have duplicated Sage onto a test net, onto an internal kind of testing grounds. It's a copy of mainnet Solana, but it's run by us. This is not new. We've always done this. This is how we've always done things. But this is basically us saying, hey, we're gonna productize that AtlasNet free to play system. And so this allows people to interact with the game basically without having to put any capital into the game, without having to basically have any sort of purchase. Now, keep in mind, this is 100% centralized. This is totally centralized. This is totally a test bed. This is very much an experimental system. There is no, this isn't real stuff. We're not saying that the Atlas that will be generated in this game will be the same as the Atlas that's on mainnet. It's a completely separate system, purely for the experimental kind of advantages that it will give us. So we're going to use a new scaling system for the ships. Because we wanted to mimic kind of the reality of how productivity scales in real life, we have a very aggressive scaling system for our ships on mainnet. So you've got a $15 ship and you've got a $100,000 ship. In this game, the ships will scale at a power of 1.5 versus a power of 5. So they currently scale at a power of 5. We're going to scale the ships at a power of 1.5. So for example, a commander is about 12x more powerful than an extra small in this system, at least as we're testing it right now. So it's going to be, somebody in the comments said 0 to hero. That is truly what this is. The expectation is that someone will come in with an air bike, and the current starting fleet is 2 air bikes and a Lobi. For testing purposes, they're going to be able to come in and hopefully within a week or two have crafted their first medium-sized ship, and then they're going to be able to hopefully in a month or two craft their first capital ship. So we're talking about basically what does Star Atlas look like in a free-to-play setting with kind of this more standard progression system. One of the tough things about creating a more like gamified experience where you're leveling up. With the mainnet version, is the mainnet version uses real money, and you can't have somebody, with a $15 ship level up to a $100,000 ship in a matter of months, because then that $100,000 ship will be worth nothing, right? So this will be using a completely different scaling system. The plan right now is to have we have all the same systems as on mainnet. We're going to launch probably. Well, we're testing currently without the LP system. We're not working. We don't have the LP system, Starbase upgrading, or Starbase maintenance right now, and we're not sure if we will launch with that. We really like the IC system for this particular implementation of the game. We will have local markets, so it'll basically be like basically the game, but free to play. And I'm trying to. There's like a bunch of other stuff that I probably should have written down, but it's I can't really express how excited I am. We're planning on very quickly adding in combat. It'll be an atomic version of combat. It won't be the version of combat that's going to come out in the mainnet version. This is really truly just an experimental kind of setting. And SDU Horror says, what's the end goal of this? I don't want to talk too much about kind of business strategy here, but the reason we're doing it is because the cost of doing this is so low. Like I said, it's a ragtag team of people within Star Atlas who have said like, oh, let's do this little fun thing. Let's see what happens. Very, very, very low cost, almost zero cost, except for obviously like the payroll and time. I'm obviously one of the people who's working on this. So it's really just like the marginal cost is so low and the marginal benefit, the potential upside is so high. We don't know what's going to happen. Maybe it's a complete, maybe nobody wants to play and it's just boring, whatever. And no harm, no foul. But we do plan on trying to monetize this free to play ecosystem. So one thing that we are obviously going to put in is an onboarding system for mainnet. So once maybe you've completed a season in this free to play game, and you say, oh, I really liked that, but I would like to play the real version with the real money. You can either, we're thinking of like some sort of porting system where you just, hey, here's my ships. I want to port those directly over. I'm gonna do a tool bundle, and I'm gonna buy those ships on the mainnet marketplace, and I'm gonna start playing Sage tomorrow or today. Another option that we're thinking about is obviously other types of classic free-to-play monetization. Obviously, ads is something that comes to mind. Microtransactions is something that comes to mind. I don't want to get too far from the ethos of Star Atlas and the Web3 technology. So that's why some of those other types of monetization aren't super attractive to me. The big piece here, though, is we do want to have some sort of a reward system. Now, this could be in the form of, kind of a golden ticket style lottery golden ticket style rewards system. Oh, geez, somebody just rang my doorbell. Something, loot drop, basically, hey, one random player each month is rewarded with, something. We haven't really worked out the details there, but basically, there's a lot of options here. Sorry, my dog is barking. Someone rang our doorbell.
We don't hear it, so don't worry.
That's good. Seeing a lot of questions. Yeah, how do you put economic incentives in a free to play setting? Just wouldn't that just attract a massive amount of bots? And I think that's probably the number one concern, right? It's like, okay, how do we make this so that it's not just a giant bot farm? And I'm putting a lot of thought into that. I think there are a number of ways we could do it. Obviously, the idea of this this randomness thing is very attractive, because especially if it's not really, to be honest, especially if it's not based off of kind of output, because then you're not incentivized to just like infinitely spam output. But at the same time, it can't be completely random, because then you'll just dupe up 100,000 wallets, and we'll end up in a situation kind of similar to like your more farming type Web3 games where they have like 100,000 users, but a lot of those users are not real users. They're just they're just creating multiple accounts to try and reap the rewards. So yeah, Jan says it's been 1.5 years and our UI is really bad, really bad. UX, UI, both really bad. Wow. Well, thank you.
We're close to Fleet Command. So
yeah, and I want to emphasize that this is not some other product. This is not some other. This isn't some like. This is not us going off and doing something else. This is literally us saying, hey, we have this thing in the closet that's been sitting there for a month. Like, let's put it out on the curb and see if anybody picks it up. This is almost no cost to us to do this, and we have never had a free-to-play way to engage with Star Atlas up until this point, where a lot of other competitors in the space do have free-to-play implementations.
Mm-hmm.
All right. I'm seeing questions. Can you explain the reasoning between ship size power decrease from 5 to 1.5? Also, will this free-to-play version ideally exist in perpetuity or mostly as a test? So with respect to the second part of your question, King Shred, it may exist in perpetuity. It might just be a test. That's the whole point of this. It's an experimental. We're pulling a lever, and we're just going to see what happens. We have no idea what's going to happen. We have a bunch of hypotheses, but ultimately we need to kind of test. If I'm not saying this is going to happen, but if for some reason all of a sudden 1 million people show up, or 100,000 people show up, that's going to give us insight onto what our next step should be. Versus, if we get 50 daily active users and we're like, okay, this didn't work, and we can move on. Now, with respect to the decrease, so if you have that level of power scaling, then the only way to keep the economy balanced is to make it so that ships that are more powerful require more effort to acquire, right? If you make, let's say, the extra small is powerful enough to easily acquire, it is powerful enough to acquire the extra small. The extra small can't have a 10x power increase from the extra small if it only took you a week to get. Otherwise, you'll have very, very quick and rapid kind of inflation of assets in the game, and then the value of those more valuable assets will be very low because you can produce so many of them so quickly, right? If an extra small can produce, let's take the extreme example. Let's say the extra small can produce in 1 minute a ship that is 10 times more powerful. You can imagine how quickly the economy will roll out of control. Versus it takes 1 week to produce a ship that is 2 times as powerful. So we're basically speeding up the growth process. Technically, like you could technically go from an XXS to an extra small with the power to the 5 scaling, but it would just take an insanely long amount of time. Like it would just take hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of years. Versus what we're doing is we're slowing that down. We don't want it to be too slow, right? Or too fast. Like if it's too fast, then we have that issue I was talking about. But if it's too slow, then we have this issue where nobody progresses.
Mm-hmm.
There
are a lot of business type of questions, like what is the objective and all that. I think it's important to reemphasize that it's a test bed for us to test new features or test whatever we need. It's low cost. It offers new players a way of testing the game without having to put in money. So it only makes sense, really.
Yeah, I think the key is, I don't know how many people know this, but we have testing. We have an entire test environment that is a copy of the Solana blockchain. It's a side net of Solana, and we're able to test our game on that side net. It is a duplication in every sense of the word. The only difference is that there's only one validator, and we control it. So there's no way to kind of attack that because we're the ones who, it's centralized. Basically, it's a centralized version of the Solana blockchain. It still uses the blockchain ledger and the storage of accounts and all this good stuff, but it's ultimately a centralized server. So basically, that's how we already test everything. We already deploy our programs on that test net, and then we finally deploy them to mainnet. So there's nothing really new that we're developing here. We're literally just like, hey, we're going to create a new copy of the game that we've already done a bunch of times.
Basically, just another game mode, right, Chris? Like, if you think about it in traditional space, you're just switching game modes to a non financially incentivized version.
Yeah, I think that's probably right. I think I want to emphasize the fact that this is an experimental like implementation, right? Just like the UE5 game has a bunch of experimental modes where it's like, play at your own risk. That's very much this. It's like, hey, we're going to open up our test environment to you guys because we think it'll be really cool, and that's really the long and short of it. Again, ideally, this leads to some other interesting paths, but it may lead to nothing, and we just leave it there.
Mm-hmm. Cool. I don't see any other questions right now, Chris. So,
Brett corrected me.
A lot of questions. So,
do you think the rental system will be useful for new players? Oh, that's a response to somebody else. No, nothing else. Yeah, I think it's a really interesting topic for discussion, of course, and I am excited for it just because it's the first time. One of the troubles with mainnet is it's difficult to run experiments on mainnet because it's permanent and it's financialized. Like, anybody who's on mainnet has spent money to get to mainnet. So experiments are much riskier and much more costly. And so this is an environment where we can test a bunch of different configurations of the game immediately, quickly, easily, without any of the baggage of mainnet. So that's why I'm excited about it. I'm also just obviously, morbidly curious. What does a free-to-play economy look like for Star Atlas, and how do we avoid? You guys brought up some really good points. How do we avoid the same issues that other guys in the industry have come to, like Pixels or other free-to-play implementations where the game can be botted and there's no upfront cost of playing the game. If there's no upfront cost, then it's purely extractive. So I'm just personally incredibly interested in trying to solve that problem. It's a problem that I've always wanted to solve, and I have ideas on how I would solve it that I won't really talk about here. But yeah, it's one big experiment, and you guys are going to be able to benefit from it, in being able to engage with it. So.
Very cool.
All right. Anything else coming in terms of questions?
Do you have any more slides to cover, or?
I think we just do the Q&A. Somebody did ask a question. Why not use a subscription account that monthly gives you resources on mainnet for progression? So I think they're probably talking about like actual mainnet progression, which I think is very interesting. We've chatted about subscriptions internally. We haven't really. I don't think we've come to any sort of consensus on one that we really thought was a great idea, and that's partially because the Atlas Locker is kind of this subscription already. It's a way for you to engage your Atlas in order to reap benefits throughout the ecosystem, and we've obviously we have some announcements coming up about the Atlas Locker. That'll be announced later, perhaps later this month. But it would be weird to come out with a subscription that competed with a decentralized product that we already have. So if we were to do any sort of subscription, it would make a lot of sense for it to throw it into the free-to-play version of the game, where it's not disrupting or interfering with our other decentralized protocol. Any new CSS game loop after GT? Oh, yeah. Let's go into Q&A. Yeah, golden tickets are done. I think golden ticket is a really cool concept, and we're definitely. I would be very surprised if we've seen the last of golden tickets. There's no immediate plans for golden tickets in the immediate future. We've talked about different ways we could revamp that feature. Okay, maybe we do it annually. Maybe we do only for special events, special releases, stuff like that. But no immediate plans. When new ship redemption recipes, give us a different one. That's probably not unrealistic. A new ship redemption recipe. I definitely like that idea. We obviously are working pretty diligently internally to get C4 out. So that whole feature update is definitely something that's occupying a lot of resources. So that's to say we don't have that many internal engineering resources to do a whole bunch of stuff with the current game as it's currently built out. I think the most common updates that we're going to see over the next couple of months are probably going to be to mainnet Sage, I should say, are going to be recipe updates. I would like to get some more faction infrastructure contracts going. I want that to be a pretty engaging loop where it's like, okay, which recipe should I be crafting based on which recipes are available for purchase, and based on where I'm located in the galaxy right now. That would probably involve adding new assets to the game, completely new recipes, regular crafting recipes, not redemption recipes. So that's certainly something I am going to be trying to work on getting into the game. Again, I'm not sure what the resources look like. I wish I had an environment where I could just click a button and load in a bunch of new recipes, but we're not quite there yet. So it does require a bit of internal coordination in order to add a new set of features and even a new recipe to the game. So claim stake recipe, that's an interesting idea. Certainly an interesting idea. Not opposed to that. Start upgrading claim stakes. Upgrading claim stakes for CS1, XX Atlas of Resources, CS2, and so on. So yeah, this idea of upgrading is super interesting. This was actually something that we had floated early on in Sage once we had the crafting system. The idea was like, well, does a redemption have to be the end of the road? Is the Fimble air bike the end of the redemption process, or could the air bike be an input into other new resources? So I think that's a really fun idea. It's definitely something I've thought about. And then that introduces a really interesting kind of destruction of assets where you can actually burn ships in order to create more advanced ships. Now, there's not necessarily a destruction of value, but there would be a destruction of the asset itself. Presumably, they're crafting a more valuable asset. Otherwise, they wouldn't have done it. Mm-hmm. Being able to craft ship components before ship config goes live. I'm not 100% sure on this one, just because ship config is kind of outside of my purview, at least right now. But I don't think we would add in crafting of any asset until that asset is usable in game. We've generally avoided adding the construction of things that don't currently have utility before they have utility.
Mm. Yeah, that makes sense.
Yeah, UE5 event ticket recipe. Oh, that's kind of a cool idea. Actually, that's a really fascinating. Katir said, "What about UE5 event ticket recipes?" And I think that probably alludes to one of the first. What I would imagine is one of the first play to earn, or at least like one of the first economy implementations that we would see in UE5, where there's a consumable, or sorry, a craftable item in Sage that's usable in UE5, kind of creating a market between those UE5 players and those players in Sage. So it could be an item that requires a lot of effort to craft. But or maybe it's an item that costs like $2. It's like some sort of entry pass that costs $2, and Sage players can produce them pretty easily, and would be willing to sell them to those UE5 players who are like, okay, I want to enter into this race, so I'm gonna buy this thing from this guy for $2. I submit my ticket. All those tickets go into a pool. Let's say there's 5 entrants. You've got 10 tickets, and $10 worth of tickets. Or I should be using Atlas, but some value worth of tickets, and then maybe 30% of that goes to first place, 20% goes to second place, 10% goes to third place, and then the rest of it goes to the house, something like that. The DAO, split between the DAO and Automata. So that's definitely a really cool line of thinking that I would love to explore.
Makes sense. We don't have Bob is saying we don't have enough players for that. We don't have the servers yet ready for that. Yeah. But once they are there, I think it could make sense.
And that's why I know a lot of people have asked. People are always asking about UE5 economy. The reality is the business cost of building that out is very high, and right now the business upside, the business benefit of doing that is quite low. So we just don't have the players yet in UE5 to justify building out the economic side, because it's just a pretty big investment on our part versus like a free to play version of Sage, which is super low cost, potentially super high upside. In terms of growth and typical revenue KPIs and stuff like that, Sage has performed very well for us, and that is that's a signal as an institution that we should focus on, if we can focus on trying to grow that. So that's why the free to play idea is so enticing, because it's low cost, high reward, high potential reward.
And just to clarify that slightly, we're very much ready to build out the UE5 economy once the UE5 environment and what would you call it? I guess game modes and peer-to-peer tech is basically ready to go. So while we have Sage, that is sort of where the economic enhancements are being directed towards. And then once UE5 is in a state where it's fun to play without the financial incentives, that's when those economic gameplay loops will be added in.
Yeah, that's a good clarification. I don't want to make it sound like we're uninterested in doing that. It's just that the product is not in a state where it makes sense to do that right now. It just doesn't. There's not really the product's not built out enough to do that. Once the product gets built out, more players will come, and then all of a sudden, it's not only in a state to work on, but it's also there's enough players to kind of support the venture. So somebody asked about burning tokens. Internally we've entertained all sorts of different tokenomic strategies and actions that we could take to change the infrastructure and change the way that the token works. But I won't comment specifically on that particular mechanism. But we do discuss things on internally. Pretty much everything's on the table when we're in our discussions.
You'll see more of our token thoughts and updates when we release more information about the locker. So,
Bohemian brings up an important point. Atlas quantity is fixed. Now that said, just because it's fixed doesn't mean that there aren't there's not Atlas in wallets that have been forgotten. So it's kind of this question of practical supply or I guess like in circulation supply versus out of circulation supply. Technically putting a bunch of Atlas into a wallet and then forgetting the key phrases to that wallet is basically burning it. It'll never go back into circulation, but we all know about this. Sweet. Well, I think we're pretty much up on time, and I think I have probably been talking for more than long enough. Our
people enjoy it, Chris.
Yeah. Our security person is in the audience, so I'll probably get an earful when we get done with this. I'm just kidding. Just kidding. She's super cool.
I don't think Kelly will say anything.
No. Sweet.
But yeah, Chris, we just got a question from PG, but I think we replied to that one many times, like creating resources that you can only earn in UE5, and then you sell them to Sage. It's similar to the ticket.
Yeah. I think that's a pretty cool idea. Obviously, the relationship can go both ways. We don't just need production in Sage and usage in UE5. We can also potentially go the other direction. So yeah, always a two-dimensional or a bi-directional relationship between the two products.
Mm-hmm. Cool. Yeah, I think.
I do really quick. Neo asked a good question about the SDU changes. I wish I had a better answer for you. As far as I know, we're still waiting on that. I guess there was some sort of an issue when they actually went to try and make the change. We've technically never updated that recipe in the game. So I guess there was an issue when they tried to update it, and I think it's a pretty low priority item. But we will let you know the moment it's feasible and we can get it updated. I'm kind of waiting to hear more on that front with the SDU update.
Cool. Anything else, Chris, before we close?
I think I'm okay on my end. Gareth, do you have anything?
Just go check out the community dashboard, and other than that, thank you guys for jumping in here with us.
Yeah, thank you, Chris and Gareth. And I know you only had 3 weeks for this one, so we're going back to regular cadence, starting with the next one. So
yeah,
next month, first Thursday, we're going to be talking about the economy as always. So thank you, Chris and Gareth.
Absolutely.
Thanks, Santi.
Have a good week, everybody.
Yeah.
Bye, guys.
See you on the next one, guys. Bye-bye.